Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Alexanne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes to help you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together. Hey, hey, how are you, ambitious wild leaders? Yes, we are living life large and being unleashed and unstoppable every single week. And we are so excited to be here with you. And today we are diving into the topic of responsibility. Now, we talk a lot about leadership, right? And we all are leaders. That was an uncovery for me because I was like, I'm not a leader. What? And we lead our lives every day. Each and every one of us are leaders. So if you haven't thought about yourself in those terms, I'm just inviting you in for the conversation today. It's going to be hot, hot, hot. That's right. Hey, Alex, Leanne, how are you?
Hey, Carol, I am doing well, and I'm really excited for this topic. You and I have been talking in the background, over the last couple days and weeks about this topic. We mentioned a little bit a few weeks ago on an episode, and then our guest, Eric, last week really dove into this topic as well. And on today's episode, we want to unpack a little bit deeper about responsibility, because I know when I first heard this in the leadership room, and I know, Carol, you have a story as well to share, it was like, what do you mean being 100% responsible?
Yeah.
And to this day, I still dance with that sometimes in different moments in going, well, I'm 100% responsible, but coming from a perspective of responsibility of that leader versus it coming from,
Yeah.
oh, it's all on me, right? Because we talk about that, about the lone wolf thing. And so we want to really unpack, when we're talking about 100% responsibility, what that actually entails for the leader. So it's not lone wolfing. It's not about burning yourself out. It's really a shift in your being and how you're operating and your perspective on how you approach certain things in your leadership and in your life. So, Carol, I love for you to share the audience when you first heard this concept of 100% responsible, all about responsibility,
Yeah.
level 4 responsibility, which is what we hear often of, is like, am I operating from a place of master leadership? Am I operating from a place of level 4 responsibility? What does this actually look like? And how did you receive this when you first heard this?
Oh, I appreciate that we're going to talk about this. If you've been where I've been, and I know that many of us have been in this place, I'm really talking directly to you because for me, it was like, no, major resistance, right? And when I started to think about responsibility, um, I have some things that I'm going to share that, as we're going to talk about this, unpack. But the way it struck me was alongside something else that I was learning. If 100% is, let's see, now the phrase went out of my mind. I'm thinking 100% is possible 100% of the time. And I had been in this place of survival brain. I had been in this place of perfectionism. I had been in this place of feeling stuck, my vision blocked, procrastination. And I was feeling it all over, right? And I'd started on the journey of doing the work and going into this pain that I was feeling. And it was really, an uncovering, a journey. And so what immediately struck me when we were talking about responsibility was I was like, I can't do that. That's too much. That's too heavy. Um,
Mm.
oh no, I'm going to crash and burn. This is a weight I can't handle. And so those were the thoughts and the feelings that were really pouring through me at that time when I received that information. And I didn't know in the beginning what to do with that. And have you ever felt like you've been juggling with all of these limiting beliefs, right? Yeah, so that's what was going on when I heard the information.
Well, and you said there a second, like heavy, right? And I remember myself too, like we're going through this transformation work. I mean, to be honest with you, I was still on my burnout recovery phase. And
Yeah,
so learning all about not doing things by myself, right? Operating with this story of leadership is lonely at the top and really working through that belief to then be introduced to this concept of like 100% responsibility. It was like, wait a second. I
yeah,
felt some contradict like inside of me there's that
yeah,
cognitive dissonance, right? This contradiction of like, okay, on one hand I've been working through all of this of not doing it all by myself and being the hero, and on the other hand now I'm hearing 100% responsibility. Well, okay, now
how
I'm
does
just
that
now
work?
now I'm can
Yeah,
right, and as I said earlier, like it's this dance. So when we're looking at 100 response, when we're looking, sorry, it's like a tongue twister. Like,
yeah,
right, like looking back, even when Eric was leaning into it last week and he was really looking at, he was talking about 100% responsibility, right? And I
Mhm.
mentioned before, we've got this level 4 responsibility. What does that, how can we help the listener really grasp what we're speaking into when we're talking about that? And for you, Carol, what I'm curious is like, what was the shift for you to see, okay, this is not this is not to be heavy. In fact, it's actually to make it lighter. So
Yeah,
to for our brain to make that shift, right? Like we know with our brain when there's a lot of perception with words, right? I mean, Carol,
yeah,
you and I even had the discussion, I think last week after recording, you
yeah,
said something and I made an assumption that by you saying that it equated to this. And when you shared your perspective, it was like, oh, actually, I mean this. And so I think even the word responsibility itself can be, quote unquote, can be triggering for some people,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
when you already feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders and you
yeah,
don't want any more responsibility. You
yeah.
actually get off responsibility because it feels so heavy and you want it to be lighter.
Yeah, those are such good points. And I appreciate that you tied in the feeling like as a leader you had to do it alone. And that's where I think for me, growing up, responsibility was a big deal in my world. And not my parents weren't too heavy-handed about that, but about in certain areas they were. And then I had health concerns as a child that required me to take responsibility or suffer almost immediate consequences. And other kids around me were failing, and I didn't want that, right? So
Mm.
I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. And I think that's a huge piece is that, when our brains want to keep us safe and they create this wall of resistance to try to keep us stuck in the old patterns that they're perceiving as safe, it's really important for us to understand that these things are going to come up as we're starting to learn new things and embrace new concepts. And so the responsibility was triggering in that it felt like pressure. And sometimes
Hmm.
we're in survival brain from moment to moment, and we're not really clear and not able to make great decisions. And so it was pressure. It felt hard. It felt and it really felt impossible. It felt like, oh no, here's another way that I'm going to fail because this
Mm,
is a requirement that's being put on me that I'm not going to be able to carry and handle. I've already got too much on my plate and I'm going to let everybody down. And
mhm. I
so,
was when I just want to because that's what was going through. It is that, as you
yeah,
said, it's that pressure. Something that was also coming to me is like, if I don't do it, it's not going to happen.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
it's really coming when we actually unpack this, Carol. What just came to me is the scarcity piece.
yeah,
It's
yes,
coming from that scarcity mentality, right?
yeah,
And if you are more of a type of a people pleaser as well, right? That there's that again, like
yeah.
what you've shared there, Carol, is like it's all of these angles of pressure that's coming on as a leader. If that this is how you see responsibility.
Yes, and I love the way you put that. And so as we continue to unpack, I think it is really important for us as we're leaning in right here on what does come up, the resistance that comes up, and we're getting the neurochemicals to keep us stuck and go, responsibility, ooh, that's a heavy word. You got to be responsible for good grades in school, and maybe you've messed up there. You've got to be responsible in sports. Ooh, maybe you've not won the game or you've failed in the sports. You've got to be responsible, responsible if you're maybe in a religious environment. Got to keep the rules. And so then we start to get this really negative perspective of what responsibility means. And that's very much where I was. And as I started the journey out of this, um, it it was an unpacking, and I love the way you said lightness. Um, when we shift our perspectives on things, it is so empowering. And so that's what was happening, this shift, this step by step shift. And what did that look like, right? It was baby steps of, oh, maybe this is not what I think it is. Maybe this is different. And honestly, through you, Alex Leon, I had a big aha in just a couple of months ago in something that you shared in an episode when we were talking about if it's meant to, it's up,
If it's
if
up to be,
it's meant to
yeah, if it's
me.
been
And
or if it's
yeah,
to be, it's up to me.
it's to me, it's up to me. And
Yeah.
100% is possible 100% of the time. These were all things that I was carrying as bricks on my shoulders, right? And finally, brick by brick, they started to come off. So, where did the light start to come in? Where did that happen? Um, one of the ways that happened was in my perception of myself in my past as a victim, that
Mm,
life was happening to me, it wasn't happening for me, and that I just had to take things as they came. And so I didn't believe in my power. And that was one of the things that Eric addressed last week. If you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you listen to it because he speaks into this. And it was where we're giving our power away. And for
yeah.
me, that was one of the places that I was giving my power away. I had been taught a lot of that in a religious environment that, you just have to take it as it comes.
Mm,
And we don't have any power to create, but we are creators. And if you are, I don't know what your beliefs may be, but I believe that I'm made in the image of my source and my creator, and that I'm a creator with that source, right? So for me, it was starting to go, oh, I thought life just came to me and I had to take it. And
mm,
being in a dysfunctional relationship, I didn't realize that I had the power to shift things
yeah.
and to
Yeah.
create a new reality. So that's where
Yeah.
it started to come undone. That was the first steps.
Well, I love that you're sharing that too, because when I looked at so we created family values for the family, and responsibility was actually one of those values. And yet, even though I chose it, well, actually, I didn't choose it. As a family, we chose it. And that
Mhm.
became because of understanding the power that when we are responsible and we look at that and we operate from this level for responsibility, this concept that through leadership, I know that you and I've been introduced to, I understood the freedom it created. And yet, because of my past, and my perspective on responsibility and what I was, I guess, feeling internally when I heard the word, I was having some cognitive dissonance between,
Mhm.
okay, I get it on a logical level of what this means and why I've chosen this for the family and especially raising daughters and
Yeah.
how I would want them to be and operate and for them to think because they are the creators of their reality, right? And they're creative of their thoughts and their
Yeah.
thoughts create their reality. And so to integrate obviously the neuroscience and the belief around that, but yet
Yeah.
every single time I read the values, I wasn't enrolled in it
Mm. Wow.
because of this emotion around what was coming up for me. And I remember having a
Yeah.
really big discussion with lots of different leaders and just out of curiosity of like, when you hear this, like what comes to you? Because I was enrolled in the vision behind like raising my daughters to be responsible, what that could create, and yet I wasn't fully enrolled in it because of the past. And so it's in this so powerful, it's so beautiful to
Yeah.
show just how powerful our past can be and
Yeah.
how it will show up in all these different areas and just sneakily show up, right?
Yeah.
And it's little words, sometimes it's something
Mm.
so subtle. And
Yeah.
so I think this is why you and I are so passionate about really unpacking this for
Mm.
for
Yeah.
you, um who is listening to this episode,
Yeah.
you as the leader, because I feel like when you really understand what we're speaking into, what Eric was talking about, and every time you and I, Carol, we talk about this,
Yeah.
for you to understand that this is really what we're leaning into, so that if
Mm.
there is anything to unpack around this responsibility and 100%
Yeah.
responsible, that you can feel empowered by it and that it is light and it does actually make things easier. Because
That's
when we,
actually, yeah, that's actually, I was going to say, I kind of, that's what's coming to me is, and we'll conclude this for you. We'll wrap this up in a nice, neat bow so that you can feel different. But you are bringing up something, the empowerment. Like
mm,
when you see yourself as a creator, it changes everything because, again, you are having control over your life. So it was powerful, it was empowering, it was encouraging. It wasn't this, oh, poof, I have to. And if you can't see me right now on audio, I'm just kind of moving my hands back and forth towards me like I'm taking life, splat the paint hitting your face and splatting on the wall behind you, for example. It's not that. That's not what responsibility means. So that shift in perspective that you're leaning into, it is light. It's a light word. It's an
yeah.
empowering word. And I know other things are coming to mind, that I think it's really, this is where we want to lean in because it actually is very freeing.
Mhm.
And that was huge. That was a huge shift, right? And
Yeah.
so unpack. I know you had this in your subconscious too. So um,
Well,
this is
I think
something
it,
we can brain prime in that
yeah.
this means freedom.
One, and it lets us loop back a little bit to even what you were sharing earlier. And I was talking about even our past, right? And our
Mm,
views of when we've probably, like as a child, grown up and heard responsibility and what that means. And when we unpack it, it's, you said it before, Carol, like life is happening to me, right? I have a little
Yeah.
or no control over it. And it's all happening to me, at me, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we fall to, and I'm mindful of using this word, but like, kind of victim, right? Because it's
Right.
all happening, it's coming at you, and there's really nothing else that you could do, right? So,
Right.
and and when that was presented, it was like, okay, so this is where we look at something that would be well looked at as like level one responsibility. If
Yeah.
this is how we're walking around and operating, and here's the reality. I mean, I don't know the percentage, but I know it's a very high percentage. Like there's a lot of people. It's autopilot, right?
Yes.
It's autopilot.
It's our
Right,
subconscious. Yeah.
95 to 97% of our daily action decisions come from the subconscious. So it's just happening. And so without even
Mm.
realizing, this is probably what
The
we're how
default
we're
zone. Yeah.
yeah, without
Yeah.
even having that awareness, right? And so that really is that first level. And then we talked about the leader, right? We mentioned
Yeah.
about feeling like it's all on your shoulders, right? Or I need to take responsibility, right? I
Yeah.
accept my
Yeah.
responsibility for what has happened, right? We're focusing on the past, it's already occurred. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like I feel so bad. I'm responsible. It's all on me. Again, heavy,
Yeah.
heavy, heavy, right?
Taking fault for things that we're not even, that aren't things that we even did wrong. And that can be very common with we women, and especially with in situations where we've got bosses or potentially partners that are putting responsibility, that word again, but again, the negative version of the word on us that we didn't earn or that we didn't, and those the language, right? We have to earn
Yeah.
responsibility. I mean, these things are all, we have to take responsibility, we have to earn responsibility, responsibilities put on us. This language that surrounds our culture around this world is a lot of this word is a lot of what we're receiving and incorporating rather than the real true meaning and how empowering it is, right?
It's the doing,
Yeah,
right? It's a lot of more of the doing of,
doing,
as you said, having to take responsibility.
yeah,
And that's that heavy. That's like, okay, the weight
yeah,
is on my shoulders, like because you're feeling little, right? Like, okay, I have to, right? It's that pressure and
yeah,
that force.
yeah,
This is where things shifted for me when learning about the term responsibility in the context of leadership and looking at,
yeah,
learning about our brains, learning about our subconscious, learning about how so much of what the brain has primed in has
yeah,
been based on our experiences, what we have witnessed, what we've heard, and realizing, okay, this is all happening in the background. Once I was introduced to the idea of really lead leading from curiosity, which we talked a lot with
yeah,
Eric about being curious about, okay, so here's the current reality, here's what's happening, what is my role here,
mm,
how do I get to be responsible in what I'm noticing that's happening, so
mm,
that I would remove myself. I think that's the thing. When we feel like we're in the middle of it,
yeah,
it's that heavy. But when we can take ourselves out of the picture and have this
yeah,
curiosity lens of like, okay, even as we talk about perspective, it's like,
yeah,
okay, so here's my perspective, here's somebody else's perspective, or here was my experience. And this is where a lot of our neuro work comes in, right? Like
mhm,
the
yes,
process that we do,
yeah,
it creates a sense of, okay, so this might be the situation up until now, but
yeah,
does it have to be like this moving forward? And that's where I was like, okay, I get it. This is how I want to raise my daughters. I want them to see the power that they have in the situation and where they get to, what decisions out they get to
yeah,
make, and what action they can take to shift the result,
yeah,
and looking at it from a more of a neutral lens and looking at it as feedback.
mm, it's so good. And it leans in again to, especially when I think about you raising your daughters, where in my past experience, it was, you know, when I was feeling like life was thrown at me, and I was, again, the heavy version of putting things on myself that were not mine to
Yeah.
have responsibility for, then we often in those situations don't know how to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So in this context of the word, of being able to establish using your voice, knowing your identity, the internal versus the external of trying to get people's approval by the actions we take. When you're looking through the lens of responsibility as a part of your being, then the healing comes in.
Yeah.
It's very healing because it's because of the empowerment, because it unleashes you being able to use your voice. It unleashes you being able to have appropriate control over a situation, not being controlling, but being able to be intentional about manifesting the reality that you are wanting to create. Because then you're like, oh, wow, I got this. I can do this. I get to write my story. I get to be who I want to be. I get to live the life that I want to live. And, we go deep in all the work surrounding this and under it and around it. But looking at looking at the word responsibility as light, as a light word, not a heavy word, as a word of empowerment, as a word of healing. And these are the reasons for me now that the word has a freedom connotation to it, because it empowers me to create the reality that I really desire. So,
I was picturing as we are talking, Carol's like, it puts you back in the driver's seat
hmm,
for you to drive to your destination, right?
yeah,
Not dictated by anything else, but
yeah,
where you want to go. And another place where I always find it very freeing, especially as a leader, when you're looking at results, when you're looking at what you are creating, it it allows you to look at, okay, so what's working, what's not
yeah,
working, where do I get to shift?
yeah,
Right? If I say that my vision is this, and if I want to create this, and I haven't, that's not the result I have right now, okay, where do I get to go? And
yeah,
it helps you stay in that commitment piece,
mhm,
right? Being committed to the vision. Let's talk about the relationship piece, as Eric was talking about last week, right? If you're committed to
yeah,
having that 10 out of 10 relationship with your partner, with your children, with your colleagues, you know, with your clients, right? Setting that vision. And if it's not there yet, okay, then where do you get to go? Where do you get to shift? And how
yeah,
do you get to create that? And that the secret, as I'm sharing this, it's that curiosity.
yeah,
Curiosity, I find, oh my goodness, when you can lean into that, really sets things free
mm,
because you release yourself from judgment,
yes,
and you also release the judgment that could be surrounding anything else
that
around you,
external
right?
approval. Yeah,
Yeah, which is that freedom, the
yeah,
lightness. And 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 that's where Carol and I really want you to really see, like, to really see the possibilities of
mm,
really leaning to, okay, so
yeah,
if I am 100% responsible, and here's the vision I want to create, where do I get to go from that? Right?
yeah,
Just even you listening to this podcast episode is you being responsible for what
mm,
is you're going to create, because you've made the decision to listen to this podcast.
yeah,
You've made the decision to reach out or be committed to listening every Thursday and taking listening to what we're saying and then putting into
yeah,
action what you're hearing
yeah,
us say, right? You're responsible in that. And that's
yeah,
powerful
yeah.
because only you can do that and create that.
And it ties directly in with the curiosity of releasing perfectionism,
Yeah.
recovering perfectionist, right? And that external approval. And go back and listen to our recent episode on being. That will really support you with this. And I also, speaking to our podcast with Eric, he really leans into, survival brain and trauma brain. There are situations where we are victimized by others, and we're not diminishing that. We're speaking in the context specifically about our leadership. But as you start to be able to be in your conscious brain where the decision making is healthy, you're in thrive mode, then this is where it gets bigger and bigger and more exciting. And so, Alex, Leanne, let's wrap this up with intention, like the being, right? The intention, all of the things we talk about, your identity, your worthiness, and being able to step into your role as creating your reality. You get to create your reality. And I didn't think that way. I was like, again, life's happening to me. And now I embrace responsibility because I'm like, wow, I get to do this. I get to create this. This is happening. And I've seen in my own life miracles unfold, and even with this hurricane that just happened recently in Florida that went to a level 5, only 9 named storms have been to this level. Stronger, they say, than in 100 years. I'm wondering, though, how did they measure that 100 years ago? I don't know. But, watching so many people gather and watching the things that happened with the storm, it came in and weakened to a 3, then weakened to a 2. And there was supposed to be this huge wall of water, 10 to 15 feet, that would easily cover houses, right? One-story houses. And instead, there was a bit of a reverse storm surge. So that's where water was being taken up out of Tampa Bay and put back into the storm. How miraculous is that? And just seeing the storm sweep across the state and become a level 1, still 100-mile per hour winds. I'm not diminishing the force of Mother Nature in any way, but we were all coming together in a very united way, and the impact it had was, in my mind, very significant. And when you start to take responsibility for connecting with people, for realizing your leadership doesn't have to be lonely, for taking those bricks off of your shoulders, that's when miracles and magic and miracles are going to happen, and you're going to be able to see them, and you're going to be unleashed and unstoppable. Yeah.
So what we want to leave you here with today is just sort of a bit of a slogan that you can carry around with you and really ask yourself, right? So if it's to be, it is up to me. And I get to be 100% responsible. And when things are happening for you, right? Having that shift of, instead of it happening to you, it's happening for you. It's leading with curiosity to look for the lesson. So there's a lesson, like there really is a lesson underneath everything that happens. And when you can look at it from more of that lighter lens of, okay, there's a lesson here. What's the lesson, right? Leading from
Mhm.
curiosity. And it may not be clear in the very moment, but
Mhm.
to shift looking at how things are presenting themselves and stepping into, if it's up to be, if it's up to be, it's up to me.
If
And I
it's
look
meant
at
to
what I want
be,
to,
it's up to me.
yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. If it's meant to be,
We
right.
keep getting tongue-tied,
And
right?
looking at the vision,
Yeah,
looking at what is it you want to create, looking at those relationships, looking at
yeah.
just around you in terms of, right, not waiting on the sidelines
Mm.
for something to happen, like for
Right.
something to happen, right? It's like
Yeah,
you get to get in the driver's seat so that
yeah,
you can move forward. I think that's what we do see a lot. And that was the thing with my girls. I don't want them to just be waiting back. I want them to go out there and create and
yeah,
be the thing, like whatever it is that they want, and have that empowerment and that
yeah,
power that they can go and create that.
yeah.
So take the empowerment piece, look at where you get to shift things, send us a message on the podcast link to let us know what you're taking action on. Go grab the wealth activation, neuroproductivity hacks,
Yeah.
let's go and really look at, okay, where do I get to shift what I'm how I currently see this word of responsibility and how it's showing up, and where do I get to take it so that it gets to be light, easy, and create more freedom for me
Yeah,
in my life.
freedom, empowering and healing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this has been so amazing to share with you guys. And we can't wait to see you next week. So send us those text messages, download our free gifts, and we're so glad you're here. So, ciao for now.
See you next Thursday. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.